Welcome, everyone, to session number 2 of the class sponsored by the Jewish Community of Sedona and the Verde Valley on the topic of ideas and innovations of the Jewish Renewal movement. This is a prelude to our fabulous Shabbaton weekend that's coming up. And the guests, David and Deborah Zaslow, are affiliated with the Jewish Renewal movement. And as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the most exciting adaptations of Jewish practice to the modern era, to our time. It's a combination of traditional Judaism with modern values, and it keeps the best of the old and opens up new opportunities, new aspects of Jewish life to practitioners of Judaism who have an opportunity to participate in Jewish renewal programs. The spirit of Jewish renewal it permeates the Jewish practices here in Sedona, and I think the elements of Jewish renewal that we can experience firsthand, directly in person, are some of the best aspects of Jewish renewal and enrich. And I bet those of you who participate in our services really enjoy many of the elements of Jewish renewal that are present there. So we're going, and you can see in the shared slide that you're watching the love in people's faces, the singing and the vitality of the worship, and those kinds of emotions and engagement are some of the best aspects of Jewish renewal. So let's get into some of the details of it. We're going to repeat a bit from the first session, but then quickly swing into some new material. It's an approach to revitalizing Judaism, to keep it alive and growing, evolving in our time. And it seeks to balance forward thinking with backward compatibility. We know we can't drive if we're only looking in the rearview mirror, but neither can we move forward if we don't know where we've been. So it's keeping up the best of the past and introducing some new material that keep it up to date, keep Jewish practices up to date. The founder of the Jewish Renewal movement is Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, and here's a very short video describing in which he explains one reason why he thought Jewish renewal was necessary in our time. This starts quietly with a brief explanation of why was Jewish renewal necessary. This was recorded in Boulder, Colorado in the year 2006. And why was he inspired to
in Orthodox Judaism, you wouldn't count a woman as being one of the 10 to make up a quorum. My sense was that our religion had become very, how would I say, imbalanced, more testosterone, patriarchal stuff in it than it needs to have in order to be friendly to the planet. And ecology became very important to me. That's the reason why I coined the word eco-kosher. It's not enough if something is kosher. It has to be ecologically kosher too. So ecofeminism started to come in and said, therefore, I cannot abide by those rules that would say that a woman's mind is not to be considered as being part of a quorum with whom to worship.
Okay, so Rabbi Zalman is saying that the old notion that a minyan had to have 10 men was archaic, and that among many other Jewish practices and prohibitions seemed out of date.
One time I was at a talk that he was giving, and it was the yard site for his mother. And he said, those of you who can stay, and I was staying with them, so of course there was no problem, could you come backstage afterwards? We're going to have we're going to daven, we're going to pray, because it's my mother's yard site. And I found my way backstage, and there were, with him, 9 men facing backward in a freight elevator. So it looked like a tiny little room, but it was a freight elevator. And when I stepped forward and crossed the threshold of this freight elevator, like this tiny room, he turned his head over his shoulder, looked at me, nodded, and began to pray. I was the 10th person. It made such an impression on me. And the week before, I had been in a kind of Orthodox setting where we were praying, and they needed a 10th person, and I was standing right there. And they looked around me and around me and around me because I didn't count. So within a week's time, one time I hadn't counted, and one time I was not only counted, but I was the 10th that made it possible for everyone to pray. And that really brought it home to me, this essence of counting a woman as a full neshama, full worthy person to be the 10th in prayer.
Okay, here's a picture of Reb Zalman, and you can see by his attitude and his manner that this was not a little shul in the traditional way of setting for prayer. It's outdoors and it's joyous. And here's the same photo on the cover of a book by him, among maybe a dozen books that he wrote. This is a memoir of his life in Jewish Renewal. A key element of Jewish Renewal is accessible spiritual experiences. So people who weren't necessarily learned in prayer or worship got deeply engaged in the practice. Want to say anything about this slide, Rabbi?
Just that I know everybody in it, and I could have easily been in that room. And the idea of welcoming in Shabbat, and obviously this is a weekday because they're wearing tefillin, but the idea of welcoming in the spirit of prayer, whether it's a weekday or a Shabbat, was with joy. And later we'll see this idea of Yetzirah, the aspect of physical expression, art, emotion, that we were bringing that back rather than sitting politely in chairs and just reciting a prayer that we know very well. You can see the joy on their faces. And Sarah Leah, who's got her eyes closed, is now a rabbi and really entered into the meaning of prayer so that it touched our souls and enlivened our expression.
And the joy of Hasidism, Hasidut, was brought into the experience of Jews from all denominations. And a key element, a key place where that was practiced was at Kalaz, which are summer gatherings of hundreds of Jewish people. This is an experience I remember having, being with a big circle of people praying, and musical instruments and harmony and nigunim, and just very joyous worship. It's Jewish camp for adults. Wonderful experience.
Yeah, I used
Technology
to go there.
was teaching people how to engage to immerse themselves in davening, in prayer, very consciously and heartfelt way. And Rabbi, please jump in whenever you want to say something. Just speak up. Egalitarianism, involvement of women and gay people and all sorts of folks. Everyone is welcome. Converts and intermarried people and people who know very little about Judaism all could participate fully. Contemplative practices were part of Jewish Renewal. Here's an advertisement for I kind of like the combination of words on that first line. Yom Kippur Zen Mindfulness Jewish Meditation Retreat. That's a wonderful ecumenical mingling of the wisdom of the East and the West.
Right. So I want to say something here where the mindfulness, meditation, chanting, silence, all of that was part of Judaism. But, there are different strains of every culture and every faith, and that part of it got minimized, especially in Reform and other liberal Jewish movements, because Jews wanted to fit in with their Protestant and Catholic neighbors. And so this was a chance after World War II where Reb Zalman saw that Jews were wounded and traumatized, and many of the masters had been killed. And so they were searching, and they would go to ashrams, and they would go to meditations, and they would go to other cultures. And after a while, what came up was they wanted to go home and bring this back home. And he encouraged that. He said, bring all those learnings back because they're really part of us.
Wonderful. Yeah, by the way, I was one of those people who wandered a little far afield and was delighted to find that the other practices that came from other faiths, one didn't need to go to other faiths, one could find them in Judaism. And one of them is chanting of nigunim, which was an important part of Lubavitcher Hasidism. I remember going to a Farbreng, I think it was called, in Brooklyn with the Rebbe, and the chanting was just, the nigunim were just very moving. And that's the old, and this is the new recording of Jewish nigunim.
Havana Shira, right.
And giving blessings is an important part of Jewish Renewal movement. And here's somebody you might recognize giving a blessing to a newly ordained rabbi. Want to say anything about that moment?
This is Yocheved Mintz, who started at seminary at 61 as a grandmother. No one could keep up with her. She had 14 grandchildren at the time, very learned educator. And so we studied together for several years, and she was ordained a year or so after me. And so I was there and I offered her a blessing, which felt really, really good. And you can see how she accepted it. There's just this connection between us, as there always is in giving blessing. And sometimes I am able to put my hands on someone's head or shoulder. Sometimes I just put my hands forward and give that as a kind of remote blessing, but the eye contact is there. The channel of blessing is there, and I never feel it comes from me, but rather through me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is not a traditional, known to everyone blessing, like the blessing over the wine or bread or a special moment. This is a unique, individualized blessing that's very suited to the moment in which it's given. Saging, trainings, and tools for rethinking aging as a journey of unearthing wisdom. Thinking of our last years, our senior years, and not as a period of decline, but as a period of deepening and more profound wisdom and spirituality as we get older. So we grow, not become diminished. And the December project refers to the last 12th, the last few years of life, and Reb Zalman partnered with Sarah Davidson to talk about what it was like to be at the end of your life and to provide a lot of activities. I'd like to do a class on this sometime, of things to ask ourselves and to bring up within ourselves and share about life's greatest mystery, preparing to transition. Also welcoming and people who have been marginalized in Jewish life. I spoke about this a little bit already. And people who are LGBTQ plus, people of Jews of color, are all very welcome in Jewish Renewal movement. Deep ecumenism, participatory engagement with other religions or traditions. Here's Reb Zalman with a gentleman you might know, Ramdas, was brought up under the name Richard Alpert, but became enamored of spirituality in India, came back to the United States, and reconnected with his Jewish roots through the Jewish Renewal movement. Roger Kamenetz is a writer who went with Reb Zalman to meet with the Dalai Lama, who wanted to learn about how Jewish people prevailed despite not having a homeland or a central temple for millennia. And here's the Dalai Lama asking Reb Zalman to explain to him the reasons for Jewish continuity. And the whole spirit of Jewish renewal brings to life the do-it-yourself spirit of the Chavurah movement, which was very popular in the 60s. Jews would be leaving large traditional temples and forming little house shuls, and the Chavurah movement. And that was picked up by, and there was a mutual exchange of ideas with the Jewish renewal movement, such as taking a Torah walk outdoors. Proactive efforts to help heal the wounded earth, Gaia consciousness. You can see earth-based Jewish practice in West Sonoma, California. Healing the earth and society through seeking peace, justice, and ecological wholeness. And a leader in that wing of Jewish renewal is Rabbi Arthur Waskow, who is married to Phyllis Berman. They both brought the name Ocean into their names as middle names. And they started the Shalom Center, which is to bring social justice work into the Jewish renewal movement. And another way of rounding it out. A project that they're concerned about now is the Purim time and the sadness of the casualties in Israel and Gaza at this time. They're looking for a way to acknowledge the suffering while remembering the reason for it. New efforts toward mutual respect between the Jewish people and other peoples and paths in the world at large and in the land of Israel. So there is making connections and not ghettoizing or isolating or separating ourselves from other people, but collaborating with them, an exchange of teachings and wisdom. Here's a book called Arab and Jew, The Wounded Spirits in a Promised Land, recognizing that everybody involved in warfare suffers, and feeling for everybody who's caught up in it. Using music, chant, meditation, dance, yoga, storytelling, and bibliodrama as ways of connecting with God and Torah. Storytelling is a very big part of Jewish renewal movement, of Jewish tradition for centuries, and will be an important part of the Shabbaton weekend coming up. Here's one of many books of collections of tales told by Jewish storytellers. And that's storytelling is a very important and central dimension of Jewish life. The first book in the Torah, the Genesis, is just full of stories of people coming into the founding of our faith and our history. Encouragement to embody wisdom in addition to learning and intellectualizing about it. In Jewish renewal, people get out of their seats and express themselves physically as well as in words and texts. Being maximalist about Judaism, applying it to many down-to-earth life dimensions, food, money, sex, health, politics, rather than limiting it to just prayer or holy days or Torah study. So here's a book by Rabbi Waskow, who you just met, Down-to-Earth Judaism, Food, Money, Sex, and the Rest of Life, a spiritual guide for a noted leader of the Jewish renewal movement. Romemu is a congregation in Manhattan, in New York City, and they have a food pantry. and just as we do. And that you'll see echoes of what we're talking about for the whole movement as things that go on in our synagogue too. And so you can feel the influence of that tradition in our own worship here in Sedona. Moving beyond old ways of connecting with God as king and judge, or as the old man in the sky, toward more intimate metaphors, such as the breath of life. From this old notion of a figure who's can almost be seen at the top of the mountain, to the just word. How would you say that word in
You wouldn't pronounce it. You would just say Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey.
Yeah.
But as Arthur Waskow often taught, it sounds like a breath. If you would say just those letters without vowels, it would sound like, which means that God is the in-breath life force within us at every moment.
It's not an old man in the sky. That's Michelangelo should have been more been exposed to Jewish renewal, but that brings the divine within us, that we're all part of the creation. Jewish renewal reads Torah as our deepest challenge and our most precious gift. So it's very thought-provoking and also something to deeply respect. So gathering around the Torah, studying it, talking about it, interpreting it, understanding it. And one of the wonderful characteristics of worship in the JCSVV is the rabbi explaining the prayers, not just turn to the page that we're reading from. Torah study, a weekly journey into the soul of Torah, is a Jewish renewal tradition that we practice in Sedona. New words and forms of prayer, for example, the four worlds of Judaism. In fact, that was my first exposure to David Zaslow. He taught a class in the four worlds of Judaism, which is an innovative way of thinking that's rooted in the Jewish renewal movement. Rabbi, do you want to explain that a bit?
The four worlds, it's not really of Judaism, it's the four worlds of creation. It's the four worlds. And you can apply, once you understand about the four worlds, and I've been teaching about this for years, is that we exist in these four worlds all the time. And it's the emanation, starting from the yearning, like God wanting to create, down through the structure, to the materials, down to the manifestation. And that's whether you want to build a house or have a baby or create a project or write a story, it all goes through those four worlds. And here are some examples. We start with the world of Asiya, which is doing, the manifested world where it's tangible and it's building and making and doing. And it's the plain meaning. It's also the four ways of reading Torah. The plain Noah's Ark, 2 by 2, animals, flood, the story part. And then you go up to the world of Yetzirah, which is creating and art and wordplay. And this is emotion and relationship. This is where we make connections, and it's called Yetzirah. Litzor means to form, like forming clay into a shape, or reading through the emotional lens. Very often, this is a hinted aspect of the words. It's a little removed from the actual Torah story, but it's more the wordplay or the trope melody or how this word is used somewhere else. Then we move up to the world of Bria, which is mental, knowing, understanding. This is consciousness, thought, intellect, and like Bore Pri Hagafen, to creating the fruit of the vine. Bria is creation, when we are aware and grateful for the creation of things. And it's also interpretation. This level of studying Torah is understanding the teaching of it, the application of it. It's like a blueprint. It's not the house, it's not the story, but it's the blueprint idea, the mathematical formula of it, so to speak. And then you rise up to the world of Atzilut, which is fire, being. There also were the elements. As you saw, there was earth, water, air, and now fire. and this is the world of emanation. Atzilut comes from the word etzel, which means to be close to. That's where we're close to the Holy One and the Creator. This is the secret. This is the aha. This is the beyond logic place, where it's totally beyond the story, but it's the kind of universal aha that where the light goes off, the bulb goes off, and we go, got it.
Wonderful. By the way, I want to remind participants in this class that you can speak up at any point. If you have a question, you want to, something clarified or explained, or you want to comment on it, you're very welcome to do that. And
Unmute themselves. Just unmute yourself.
yeah, you need to unmute yourself first. So this world of Jewish renewal is, it's more an attitude than a denomination. And so we're not affiliated with Jewish Renewal, but the attitudes of Jewish Renewal permeate our congregation, as they do hundreds of congregations across America and around the world. However, there are a few about 50 Jewish congregations that identify strongly with Jewish Renewal, and one of those is the synagogue in Ashland, Oregon, where the Zaslows are the leaders. So there is a national organization called Aleph, which is the Alliance for Jewish Renewal, and it's a core institution of the Jewish Renewal movement. That's their logo. You see the letter Aleph in the graphic there, and they have a variety of activities and send out materials all over the country. And they have a network of communities that affiliate with Aleph. One of them, and the original one, was B'nai Or, the Jewish Renewal Congregation in Philadelphia. Another happens to be one in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and Santa Cruz, California, and the Hudson Valley. And you can see that the spirit of music and joy and singing and engaged worship permeates all of these congregations. Here's one in the San Francisco Bay Area, Beit Tikkun. It's a Jewish Renewal synagogue. And there are other congregations around the world. Here's one in Poland.
Right, and
I
this
believe you
man,
visited, Rabbi.
I want to say something, yes. So Chaim Beliak helped me and my mom when we went to speak in Poland in 2013 and present the book that I wrote about my mother's miraculous survival. She comes from Krakow, and she survived the war through all kinds of incredible challenges, and she couldn't believe that she would be welcomed back into Poland and not be in danger. And Chaim Beliak got us in touch with various institutions like the JCC in Krakow, like Beit Warszawa in Warsaw. And so we got to go to several places where we could speak. And my mother was the featured speaker, and our book came out in Polish. And we were presenting that in various synagogues and JCCs and a couple of places where it was just young people. And so really, it's amazing to think that there could be renewal in a place like Poland that saw so much anti-Semitism and destruction and death, during the Holocaust. So I'm very grateful to Chaim Beliak and the work he does.
Yeah, wonderful. And Aleph is the organization that puts on that annual Kala, every 2 years rather, that in which people gather to worship in the outdoors and in groups and to participate 24/7 during the all day long during the gathering itself. They also have a association of rabbis and cantors for Jewish Renewal, Ohala.
I'm in that group. I'm a member.
Yeah, and a leader of that group is Marcia Prager. Isn't that Marcia Prager there?
That's Marcia Prager, who has the greatest smile, and she was like the mommy of the rabbi. She was the dean of that rabbinical program. You know, I was in another seminary as well, Academy for Jewish Religion, but I spent about 10 years studying with her. I can see Hannah Tiferet behind her there. I see a whole group of friends, and she was teaching also the davening leadership training over 2 years that I attended. I think we might have a slide about it.
Yes. They have a rabbinic studies program that the rabbi is just talking about. And there's a very interesting variety of people who participate, who feel at home in the Aleph organization, who might not feel as welcome in other denominations. And as you can see, women study, and I believe she's wearing a rainbow tallis. Is that one of?
Correct. And each of the stripes was designed for the width and breadth and color by Reb Zalman to represent the Sefirot, the energy centers of the Tree of Life.
Mm-hmm. And they run a saging program based on Rabbi Zalman's teachings. And this is an opportunity not many people have to encounter the Dalai Lama so closely, or Reb Zalman. I can tell you that that the sparks flowed back and forth between these two very highly respected spiritual leaders. But they're joyful. They're not serious, somber, intellectual. They're in touch with each other.
They certainly were. I'd like to add a point here that the reason they were meeting is because the Dalai Lama and, they were thrown out of Tibet and they were exiled. And he asked Reb Zalman, you are also a nation in exile. Your people left thousands of years ago. We left in 1959. How do you hold on to your traditions as a people in exile? How do you hold on to your connection with the land, with your teachings? And so Reb Zalman said, the Seder. And he talked about how in Passover, we tell our story of leaving slavery and becoming free and becoming a people. And we teach it to our children, our children's children, and they have a role in it. And he described quite in detail the importance of Seder. He also said summer camp, but he started off with Seder.
Mm-hmm. And in homes where so many Seders are celebrated.
Right.
Another aspect of the Aleph organization is the Center for Devotional Energy and Ecstatic Practice. That's their logo. And they do things like a Torah trek, worshiping in the outdoors, in the wilderness, and Travel as a Spiritual Practice, a book written by Shefa Gold, and an album of songs. Exploring the dance between the ecstatic and the contemplative as we open to love. And we'll be talking a little more about Shefa Gold, who's a leader in that group, in a minute. Cultivating Chesed, a one-day workshop in loving kindness. Norman Fisher is a Jewish man who became a Zen teacher, and Rabbi Shefa Gold. So rather than splintering and separating, connections are maintained between Jewish Renewal people and Jewish people who have gone in other directions. So the ties are still there. Here's a demonstration by how Shefa Gold brings chanting into Jewish practice.
Rabbi Shefa Gold, and I live in the mountains of northern New Mexico, and I travel the world teaching Torah in my particular style. And I this evening I'm going to be doing this practice that's dear to me, which is the practice that I call chanting, which is to take a sacred phrase and bring it to life, and embodying that sacred phrase until it gives its treasures to us. And we're going to be doing it with a group, although I chant on my own as well. It's a practice of meditation, of taking Torah inside me and receiving its lessons, its truth.
That's Chef of Gold is a name to remember, and any way you could be connected to the kind of work the kind of prayer she leads would be a blessing.
Mary had a question she wanted to interrupt here.
Actually, it's a comment that so many of the readings that we have on our Kabbalat Shabbat services are adaptations of hers that the rabbi has tweaked to be what we would need to hear. So we're already quite familiar if we've been watching or attending those services.
Thank you, Mary. So that's from Torah Journeys, which I originally received as faxes. Remember faxes? Every week until it came out as a book, Torah Journeys. And I looked to that for some of her lessons, the spiritual lesson and the blessing of each Torah service, Torah portion. And so I do bring that to you often on a Friday, and I do adapt it. We were talking here about her chanting, which is also part of her way of getting inside the underneath of some of our Torah portions that might feel on the surface inaccessible or old or ancient or just not accessible to us in our modern times. But she finds a way in, both in word and in chant. So I try to bring some of that to you.
Yep. That's that's the juice that Jewish Renewal background brings into Sedona and the Verde Valley. And a center for Aleph is associated with the center called Elat Chaim for Jewish spirituality, and there's a Jewish retreat center for in-depth retreats and immersion in Jewish life, called the Isabella, sponsored by and paid for by Isabella Friedman. Elat Chaim that's their logo, and that's the logo of the retreat center. And essentially what they do is what Mary was just talking about, making prayer real, leading Jewish spiritual voices on why prayer is difficult and what to do about it, how to bring ancient prayers into our modern life and modern world. And they even hold silent meditation retreats. Rabbi David and Shoshana Cooper, a blessed memory, did some wonderful programs there. Have you ever studied with
Rabbi
David
David
Cooper?
wrote, God is a verb, because God is always godding and creating and flowing. And I did several retreats with them and had some quite spiritual experiences with them, some of which I've shared in my Torah study class. This is the davening leadership training. I was in the first cohort back in 2000 to 2001. It was over 2 years. Every 6 months we went for a week of all kinds of davening. We learned how to make transitions from one to the other, how to bring in the four worlds in the choreography of a service, different melodies and ways to present a particular prayer in English with poetry, sung, chanted, danced. And we had to go home and practice, and then we would come in another 6 months and we would do first the weekday and then the Shabbat and then High Holy Day, and learn how to do Hallel, which is this set of Psalms for the festivals. And I don't understand how anyone could be a rabbi or a cantor and not go through this service, because I tell you, no seminary goes as deeply into how to lead, not just what the prayers mean, but how to lead them as this particular DLTI Leadership Training Institute did. Now imagine, we know how to go, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, right? The Ve'ahavta, we know how to chant it. So imagine a circle of us, I don't know, we were about 60 at the time, with a pillow, and we had to throw the pillow to the next person with just one word, Ve'ahavta. We throw it, somebody catches it, et, throws it, Adonai, boom, Elohecha. Without the chant, could you really keep the words? And then if you drop the pillow, he'd say, well, this happens in a service, especially if you're a team and you're working with others. You drop the pillow, you forget where you are, you make a mistake. Do you leave the pillow on the floor? No, you have to pick up the pillow and keep going. So there were all these metaphors of how to lead, what to do when you mess up, because everybody messes up, and varieties of ways to deal with the very interesting, I would say, paradox of being in a state of prayer while leading prayer. And you've seen me sometimes be a little overcome when I'm giving a blessing, or one of the prayers just really hits me in a new way and I need a moment, but then I go back into leading. So all of these things were discussed in those 2 years of the Davening Leadership Training, and I really bring this to you.
And what a gift it is. Yes, it's wonderful. One of my alienating moments in Jewish life was going into Orthodox synagogue where I grew up in New York, and hearing people mumbling rapidly, going through prayers and almost hardly paying any attention to what they were saying. And that was a turnoff. But this approach is so appealing and so meaningful and so valuable and worthwhile. So but there are one of the wonderful things about the Jewish Renewal movement is that there are people who stand out, who are like extraordinary role models and exemplary, and almost continuing the Rebbe tradition from Eastern Europe, who are like Shefa Gold and other people that you're going to meet are standouts in this community. One of them is Michael Lerner, who's a brilliant intellectual who's written a number of books, a book on Jewish Renewal, The Path to Healing and Transformation, and trying to provide answers for the discord in the Middle East. He's the founder and editor of a wonderful magazine called Tikkun. Do you want to say what Tikkun refers to in Jewish teaching?
Healing
Rabbi?
and repair.
Yeah, making the world better. That's
You have to know it's very to the left, but there's room for everything. So he's pretty out there, and I met him at many occasions. One time he was a symbol for my decision to become a rabbi. I had just finished a service with Rabbi David Zaslow at one of the kalot. This was way before I had joined the group to study to be a rabbi. And I got caught in a downpour across a whole meadow. And I was going, should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? And there's this downpour and I'm completely soaked. And I get to this little bridge to get to the dining room where everybody was going to be. And the only person, there are 800 people in this kala, the only person who crossed the bridge as I was crossing it, coming toward me, was Michael Lerner. I took that as a sign. And then I walked into the dining room, wet, like soaked, and people who were lining up for the meal. It was the first people I had seen before this whole trek in the rain, this like mikvah, this kind of soaking experience, and seeing Michael Lerner on the bridge were these people. And they looked up to me and they said, "Where have you been?" And I was thinking, wow, I can't even answer that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Kala environment is mystical and magical and marvelous. Yeah. Another well-known leader in the Jewish Renewal movement is the rabbi in Boulder, Colorado, Tirza Firestone. And she's a very wise woman, and does sort of therapeutic Judaism,
Yes,
healing
she is a
intergenerational
counselor.
trauma.
She's a therapist. And
Mhm.
the first one with Roots in Heaven shows her history. She comes from an Orthodox background where they did not want to accept her. Her family didn't want to accept that she could be a rabbi, and it was very painful for her. But she talks about Roots in Heaven is a Kabbalistic expression where think of a tree and you think of the branches of being up, but here you've got roots in heaven, and that's a Kabbalistic phrase. Beautiful book. Her most recent book is Wounds into Wisdom, and it's about intergenerational Jewish trauma. Like, I'm a daughter of Holocaust survivors, and if you don't think that influenced me, you know, it really, really did. And we all have different we have intergenerational, you know, visiting the whatever it is of the parents onto the third and fourth generation. That really is true. It goes into our DNA, and she goes into that. Tirza was the one who stood immediately behind me when I received my smicha, my ordination, from the Jewish Renewal movement. My two ordinations were very different. One was very moving and full of a different kind of music, and we actually leaned back, because smicha also means to lean against or to depend upon. And all of us in our cohort that were becoming rabbis and cantors, but in this case rabbis, leaned back, and I leaned right into her hands. So she was my mentor, my teacher, and the one through whose hands the blessing of all those generations of teachers came to me.
This is her giving a talk about the Sefirot, and this is the program that she leads. By the way, if you ever travel around America and even abroad, to look up on the Aleph homepage for Jewish Renewal congregations, and attending one when you visit a community that has one is a great way to enrich a travel experience. Here's a little taste of Tirza Firestone telling. She's a storyteller as well, and as we said, that's a core element into the Jewish Renewal movement. Here's her telling a story.
One of the most beautiful sacred texts I've studied is from the 13th century book known as the Zohar. And it teaches us that every effort we make in our lifetimes, every good deed and every bit of spiritual growth that we achieve becomes a stitch, just a stitch in a beautiful soul garment made of light. We call it a radiant cloak. And when we leave this world, the teaching goes, and our souls emerged from our physical bodies, we're given this radiant cloak to wear. It's a cloak of pure light that protects us on our journeys in the universe. Well, I think that the Zoharic sages are telling us about our light body, that which will live on after this physical body peels away.
Okay, well, she goes on, and I don't know that we have time to hear all of it, but you get a feeling of her rooting psychological and philosophical and spiritual principles in the Zohar, in the Kabbalah teachings. Another well-known person in the Jewish Renewal world is Rabbi David Ingber, who has a synagogue in Manhattan called Romemu. We spoke about that briefly. This is a very welcoming, very inclusive congregation. Let's see. So he says, what we need is a living, breathing Judaism, not an object of veneration kept locked up in a box. We need a Judaism with calluses on its hands and dirt under its fingernails, so that gets into everyday life and isn't hold itself aloof or separate from the struggles that people have in their lives. He's recently led a solidarity mission to Israel. So he's very involved in everyday Jewish life. Here's an example of the kind of spirituality in Romemu, his congregation's approach to worship.
Sometimes I lay under the moon and I thank God I'm breathing. And then I pray, don't take me soon, 'cause I am here for a reason. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more, there'll be no more war, and our children will play. One day, one day, one day. Oh, one day, one day, one day. It's not about win or lose, but we all lose when they feed on the souls of the innocent. Blood-drenched pavement, keep on moving though the waters are raging. In this maze you can lose your way, to drive you crazy, but don't let it phase you no way. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more, there'll be no more wars, and our children will play. One day, one day, one day. Oh, one day, one day, one day.
We're going to write to Romemu. By the way, that's a very popular synagogue in Manhattan, and has been an attractor to many young people. In fact, we're going to write to them and ask them to send us some of those young people. We can borrow them for a month or two to expand our outreach in this community. I don't know if they're willing to do that, but it can't hurt to ask. So here's another major figure in the Jewish Renewal movement, Rabbi Marcia Prager, who was in charge of the program that our rabbi participated in, and she's written books. And there are many books in the Jewish Renewal movement, and you can see the kind of effervescence that she's trying to communicate in this that is essential to Jewish life and in this book. Here's and she wrote a Siddur for Saturday morning. There are a number of innovative Siddurim that have been written by leaders in the Jewish Renewal movement. And here's a little flavor of Marcia Prager demonstrating how she approaches song and music and the Jewish spirit.
Now over to Marcia Prager, Rabbi Marcia Prager, and
I believe that's her husband,
two of
isn't
the
it?
greatest
The
Isabella
cantor?
Friedman teachers, whose hundreds of students are located across the four corners of the
Turn
earth.
up your volume, folks, if you can. We won't listen to this too long, but that's Marcia Prager and I believe her husband, who's a cantor. She goes on to add some prayers to that.
I'd like to add something there
Go
before we
ahead.
move on to Rami Shapiro. Oh, Reb Marcia and her husband, Chazan Jack Kessler. He taught the cantors and he would lead the singing. What a team they were, still are. And a few times I had the guts to bring her meditation cards for the weekday Amidah to our weekday minyan. This was before COVID and before we were only meeting on Zoom. And I handed them out to everybody, and everyone took one of the cards for the Avot and the Gevurot and the Kedusha and all the different parts. And she would have a meditation and a beautifully designed art expression of that. And it deepened the possibilities of connection with each of the 18, there are really 19 parts, but it's called the Shmona Esrei, the 18, the standing prayer, the Amidah of weekday. And that's the creation that she does. She says, how can I make this accessible? How can I bring a one-line blessing so that people go, now forever, when I say the full prayer, I'll have this in the background and I'll have a deeper connection. And for this, I'm forever grateful to Reb Marcia. Now you see the focus in her eyes, the smile on her mouth, that is Marcia. And I studied with her for over 20 years. She's not well right now, and I send her all kinds of healing blessings, but always try to find that nugget of reality and connection in every prayer so that you don't just recite a prayer or turn to page 180. No, we're in a choreography and a sweep going up the mountain and coming back down. Thank you, Reb Marcia. You taught me that, and I pass that on to my congregation and to my students, because I also teach tefillah. I teach prayer now in the seminary, the Academy for Jewish Religion, where I'm on the faculty. And so I'm handing on the sparks of Torah that I learned in my own way, through my own lens. And I just want to express my gratitude for having that teaching, which I would not have gotten at a regular seminary. I would not have gotten that. Although we use the Reform Prayer Book, I would not have gotten that in the Hebrew Union College training. So just want to say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very special person. She received her smicha from Reb Zalman, as did all of these outstanding rabbis. They were inspired by him. And another one who that applies to is Rabbi Rami Shapiro, who had a congregation in Florida for a number of years and has since then become a kind of traveling rabbi. And he visited in Sedona, I think, a couple of times, and is wonderful at bringing the spirit of Judaism into the modern world. He's written about 25 books, of which this is one of them, but it can show the connection to the traditional Judaism to our modern worship. And he writes for Spirituality and Health magazine, writes I think roadside assistance for the spiritual traveler. So as a Jewish person and writing from his own tradition, he has a regular monthly column in the magazine, in the periodical Spirituality and Health. He also, his most recent book is Judaism Without Tribalism, of how we can expand our vision to not just helping the Jewish people, but helping all people all around the world. And there are references in the Torah to that's our role, to be a light unto the nations.
I also want to say that he led a workshop that I took in being a holy rascal.
Yeah.
Breaking the rules and really finding the juicy harmony and humor in things. And I have a certificate that calls me a holy rascal from him.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Yeah, that's a wonderful phrase, that he's very spiritual, very holy, but he's a rascal. And he's kind of independent and doesn't just take things that are given as they're given, but adds his own little flavor to it. there's a branch of Aleph in Canada that has a fundamental purpose aligned with all Jewish renewal work, reclaiming the Jewish people's sacred purpose of partnership with the divine in the inseparable tasks of healing the world and healing our hearts. So that's a mission statement that is very important in the Jewish renewal world. The founder of that is and a person who is the head of Aleph for a number of years is Rabbi Danny Siegel, who also has is trying to modernize halacha practice and make it a little more, making it as meaningful as possible into a living way of walking in the world, not just a set of rules that we need to follow, but making it so that we embrace it. Integral halacha goes beyond the classical system while simultaneously including it. It is, in Reb Zalman's words, both renewing and backwards compatible. So nothing is being violated, it's being enriched, renewed. And here he is ordaining 3
Dayanim. So Dayanim are those, Sarah Leah, the first one with the purple talit, is a good friend of mine, and she is also a doctor. And many people come with other professions, and a dayan is someone who can give opinions. So she gives opinions like on medical issues, because there's end of life and there's surrogacy and who's a Jew if you have a surrogate mother pregnant, and does the child need a mikvah to be converted to Judaism, etc., etc. So each of them has their own area, but they're considered dayanim, which is beyond being a rabbi. She's also a rabbi, but to make halachic judgments where people would go to them and say, is this a yes or a no? Is this kosher or not? Is this okay? Or what do I have to do? So it's a really big deal. And that has to do with halacha, which comes from the word holech, which means to walk. It's the Tao. It's the way you walk in the world. So it just doesn't mean law. Halacha is how do you walk in the world in a Jewish way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it's important to have that kind of wisdom within the Jewish renewal movement so that people can get those opinions and guidance within the Jewish renewal world. Danny Siegel's spouse, Hannah Tiferet Siegel, is a wonderful woman, a rabbi and a singer, and also a great spirit within the Jewish renewal movement. Here's an example of she has a number of albums of songs she's written and performed, and they're beautiful. And
as a matter of fact, it's one of the ways we introduce candlelighting. Come, let us light up our hearts. Come, let us light up our homes. And she uses the feminine, Brucha at Shekhinah, instead of Baruch Atah Adonai. She introduces the candlelighting with a feminine form of the blessing. And I sing that about half the time. Sometimes Debbie Friedman's with lighting the candles, and sometimes Hannah Tiferet. So when I sing that on those weeks, you'll know that it comes from her.
That's Hannah Tiferet Siegel. And we come to the next leader of the Jewish Renewal Movement, our upcoming guest, Rabbi David Zaslow. And he's musically oriented and an intellectual. He's got the whole package and is a wonderful leader of a synagogue in Ashland, Oregon. And these are some of the people in his congregation.
No, these are all pictures of him.
Pardon me?
Those are all pictures of him in different ages.
Ah, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yes, he has a photo album of his own life experiences, and those are all, I hadn't even realized that. I've seen those photos isolated, but I didn't realize that was what they were all combined. And here he is with Reb Zalman. They were close colleagues. And these are 2 books he's written. One is called Jesus, the First Century Rabbi, in which he makes the point that if Jesus were to come back he would come to the synagogue. He said the prayers that we say. He sang the songs that we sing. He would be stunned that there would be churches all over the country and all over the world that worship him, because he was a devoted rabbi, a devoted Jew. He never turned his back on that. He never asked for a new religion to be a circle around him. Also, Rabbi Zaslow wrote a book on the Exodus story, saying that it's really every group's passage from repression to freedom. It's what every liberation group in history refers back to our Exodus as their inspiration. The former slaves in the United States and everywhere else in the world, and every people that had to migrate toward freedom were inspired by our Exodus. He wrote a Siddur that the rabbi uses periodically, and here's a little film of him, as I recall. I think it's a poem he wrote.
The light of you from a far star years away. I swear it's now, but know it was a light from long ago. And now my light from this star here, our sun, will travel far to meet your eyes. To you it will be now, in years to come, you'll swear. When I say that I recall, and you say, now I see. This I've learned. My past is your tomorrow, as yours is my today. And now I see what was so long ago to you, to me is now. And so I say, now I see.
Yeah, it's a nice connection of the past and the present and the future, which is characteristic of Jewish Renewal. Rabbi Zaslow's wife, Deborah, is a Magid, who is a storyteller, and she will be here as well, telling stories of healing and renewal. That's an album, I believe, she created, also a book, and here they are together. They'll be a delight to experience together. And here's a little taste of Deborah Zaslow telling a story.
So we've been talking a lot lately in our Torah portions about building a sanctuary. And when we talk about building a sanctuary on an internal level, we're talking about building a space to be with God. And internally, that means building a special relationship, our own relationship with God. So my favorite character in Jewish stories who has a very close relationship with God is Reb Zusha. And Reb Zusha could talk to God. He talked to God all the time. And when he talked to God, he would not say I. He'd say, Rabbonu Shalom, Master of the Universe, Zusha is a little cold, or Zusha is a little hungry, as if there was no I in talking to God. He was just a piece of God talking to God. And here's a story about Reb Zusha. Every morning, Reb Zusha would get up in the morning and he would go to shul to lead the morning prayers. And then he would come home for breakfast. And when it was time for breakfast, he'd sit down at his table and he'd say, Rabbanu Shalom, Master of the Universe, Zusha is hungry. Please, please, bless Zusha with a little nourishment. And that was the signal for his attendant to bring him his breakfast. And when he was finished, Reb Zusha would say, Oh, Rabbanu Shalom, Master of the Universe, Zusha is so happy with what you brought me to eat. Thank you so much. Well, one day the attendant was thinking, and he thought, well, Every morning he asks God to bring him breakfast. But who brings him breakfast? Me. And every morning he thanks God for his breakfast, but he doesn't thank me. And he decided tomorrow morning, when he asks for his breakfast, if he's so hungry, when he asks God, let him wait for God to bring him his breakfast. And if he wants me to bring it, he'll have to ask me by name. And he'll have to thank me too, because I'm not bringing it till he asks me. Well, the next morning, Zusha got up as usual, and he went to the shul to lead the morning prayers. And on his way back, it had begun to rain, and the streets were muddy, and they were narrow cobblestone streets. And he was walking through a kind of narrow alley, and a stranger approached him, and it was a tight space, and the stranger just shoved Zusha out of the way, and Zusha landed smack in a mud puddle. And the stranger didn't even stop to say he was sorry, he just walked away. But do you think Zusha got angry? No, not Zusha. He said, "Oh, Rabbana Shalom, thank you for shoving me in the mud. It could have been somebody else, and this way it was me instead. Thank you so much, Rabbana Shalom." And then he went home, because it was breakfast time. Now, he sat down to get his breakfast. But in the meantime, this stranger who had shoved Zusha in the mud went to a nearby tavern. And he was boasting to the innkeeper about the beggar in rags that he had shoved into the mud because he got in his way. And the innkeeper said, "Tell me, what did that beggar look like?" And the stranger described the man that he had pushed. And the innkeeper said, "Oh, that was no beggar. That was a holy man. That was our rabbi. That was Reb Zusha, the holiest of the holiest." Well, the stranger was mortified, and he said, "Oh, I must go say I'm sorry. Please tell me where he lives, and what can I do to apologize, to tell him I'm sorry, to make up for this?" And the innkeeper said, "Here, let me give you some cakes and ale," and he gave him all kinds of goodies and food to take to Reb Zusha. Meanwhile, Reb Zusha sat down for his breakfast, and he said, "Rabbana Shalom, Master of the Universe, Zusha is quite hungry. I had a morning this morning, you know. Please bring Zusha a little nourishment." And the attendant just stood there, and he thought, okay, now he's going to wait for his breakfast. And Zusha said, "Rabbana Shalom, you must be a little bit busy, Master of the Universe, but Zusha is hungry. Could you please bless Zusha with a little nourishment?" And the attendant thought, yeah, bless Zusha. Let's see what happens. But what happened was there was a knock on the door. And the attendant went and opened the door, and there was the stranger with cakes and ale and all kinds of food that he brought to Zusha. And Zusha said, "Master of the Universe, thank you so much for this delightful nourishment." And from then on, the attendant, whenever Zusha said, "Master of the Universe, Zusha's a little hungry," the attendant just went and brought him food, because he realized that he was just like Zusha and just like all of us, only and especially a servant of God. Good Shabbos, everybody. May we all be like Reb Zusha.
Makes me realize that the epidemic, the COVID period, brought a lot of Jewish programming to be recorded on Zoom and made available to those of us around the world, just like this program will be made available all around the world. So this was a little preview of the Shabbaton weekend. You're going to be able to spend time with David Zaslow and Deborah Zaslow with wonderful programming based on the Jewish renewal spirit. And by the way, the last rabbi also received smicha from Reb Zalman is our own Rabbi Alicia Magal. So here's her certificate of rabbinic ordination from Aleph, the Alliance for Jewish Renewal. You see near the top of the page. And let's continue. Here she is with Reb Zalman getting her Jewish Renewal ordination.
I have to say something about when Reb Zalman said, Alicia Leben, is what he called me. You're going to get your ordination soon, but while you're here at my house visiting Eve, your best friend, I'd like to write out the certificate for you myself. He went to the computer and he wrote it out. He really loved the computer. And then he said, you know, do you have any other name? Because Amalia, which was my Hebrew name, after my mother's name, he said, Amal is a burden. It's a heavy work. And worker of God, yes, you're going to be Amalia, a worker of God, but it's kind of heavy. Did they call you anything else? I said, well, in Israel, they called me Alicia, which means happy, and it's the closest to Alicia. And he said, well, that's good. So he changed the name. Go back one slide. So it's the only place in the world where I'm noted as Rabbi Amalia Aliza Liba Magal, and it means of honored here. And so it's the worker of God with a joyful heart, Aliza Liba. He added that. That's not part of my name anywhere else, but it's on my certificate that I should serve, but with a happy heart and not feel it as a burden. So I wanted to tell you that. Nobody else in the whole world knows about this little exchange except you.
Okay, here's those photos again. And here is our own Rabbi Alicia Lisa with Rabbi Zalman.
Right. He was teaching me how to put on the tefillin. And he said, just put them on, take them off, put them on, take them off till you feel comfortable with it. And go down to my prayer space, which was downstairs. And so I did that, and we were having a conversation about it, and I was showing it to Eve, who's outside the picture, but you can see how happy he is that he was helping me become comfortable with something that was really a male prerogative to wear tefillin. And so at many times I was wearing them as well.
Wonderful. And here's the benefits that we received from a rabbi's Jewish renewal exposure.
Here I was the guest lecturer in another congregation.
And here, let's see. Yeah, there's another example, and you just don't see the kind of colorfulness and joy in all through as much as we experience. We're blessed to have here in Sedona. And here's a little video made a few years ago of our rabbi, and see if you can feel the Jewish renewal spirit in this video.
The wonder and beauty of nature inspire me and fill me with gratitude to the Creator. The flow of blessing is like kindling a light. It touches another and elevates their spark, and yet we are not diminished. Offer blessings, let them flow. It is the greatest gift we have to give each other, and we're all empowered to give blessings. I'm Rabbi Alicia Magal, the spiritual leader of the Jewish Community of Sedona and the Verde Valley. I'm a seeker of wisdom in all its realms, and I call Sedona home.
Okay, And as you can see, not only is Jewish Renewal in the background of our rabbi, but also her wonderful, inspiring mother, her wonderful, inspiring husband, her wonderful, inspiring congregation, and her divine inspiration. You can see the little dove in the upper left-hand corner of this photo. So this is the spirit of the Jewish Renewal movement, and it's connected to our congregation and connected to the Shabbaton that's coming up this weekend. So I turn the program over to the rabbi and anyone else who would like to comment on what we've explored today.
Paul, I really want to thank you for putting that together. I had forgotten about that particular video clip I did in the first year when I was here. And looking back on all the wonderful mentors and colleagues that I had through the renewal movement, I was lucky enough to spend many, many, many years becoming a rabbi, and therefore I had many opportunities to study, work, and pray in all of the denominations: Reform, Reconstructionist, Conservative, Orthodox, and the renewal was part of my training. But from everywhere I picked something. And from the weave of all of these threads of Judaism, that's who I am and what I bring to you now as the spiritual leader of this wonderful community.
And thanks to all of you for attending this class. And it's delightful. We're so pleased and happy to have you with us. Is there any comment that you would like to make on something that struck you about today's program?
I actually had a couple of questions. I was wondering if you could briefly talk about the difference between renewal and Reconstructionism, because when I think of Reconstructionism, I think of a lot of the same elements as renewal. And I know you touched on that just briefly in the PowerPoint. And then my other question has to do with to me, it seems surprising, the connection with Hasidic tradition, which I always identify with as much more conservative and traditional. So it seemed like an unlikely marriage there. I was wondering if you could talk about those two issues.
Well, those were the questions, Jenny, so thank you. Reconstructionist was founded by Mordechai Kaplan, who wanted to speak of Judaism as a civilization. And he pretty much took out all of the supernatural stuff. In other words, he didn't even want us to be considered a chosen people, but rather a choosing people. And he changed some of the liturgies. So coming up to the Torah in a Reconstructionist synagogue, where I also worked for many years, they didn't say Bahar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, who chose us among all the people, but Kerav Tanu le'avodato, who brought us closer to his service. So Reconstructionist was it wasn't supposed to be a movement either, but it sort of grew into a movement. And it has its own rabbinical seminary and affiliated congregations. But it started out just, as you said, to reconstruct, to renew, to bring Judaism into a kind of modern understanding, and it was pretty intellectual. And then the other part of your question about renewal, as how could it be neo-Hasidic? That seems so old. It seems so conservative with a small c. Yes, so that's why renewal is considered a kind of neo-Hasidism that took from Hasidism the ruach, the spirit, the dancing and chanting and nigunim and depth of study, of knowing Hebrew and going inside the words and looking at our mystical tradition and our Zohar and the Bahir and our ancient wisdom, but bringing it into an egalitarian and inclusive modern age. So it was really backwards compatible, as Reb Zalman said, but contemporary in the way that anybody here on this Zoom call could be part of our minyan and would be counted. So each group of Jews tried to re-identify in a way that was meaningful. And some of them got labels like Reconstructionists. Now, the Reform started in the mid-19th century in Germany with Jews who wanted to be modern and assimilated in some way and just say, well, Judaism is my faith, but I want to, not have a beard, and I want to be able to go skating on Saturday. And, they wanted to be like their acceptable Protestant neighbors. And a lot was thrown out, a lot of the Hebrew, a lot of the teachings, a lot of other previous prohibitions. And so Renewal tried to bring the beauty back that had been lost, but not to keep the separation of men and women or the barriers. So the doors were flung open in a way, saying, come, you're welcome here, and then keep studying. So the barrier was very low for entry, but then there were rooms and rooms and rooms to enter in the mansion of Jewish knowledge. And often we say, here's a little tiny bit of learning, like you should be kind and nice, but the study of Torah is equal to them all because it leads to them all. So the same way as here's the entry gateway for you. Is it chanting? Is it social action? Is it clapping? Is it music? Whatever it is. And then stay and study and learn and deepen and let it just sink into you so that you're proud and knowledgeable and you carry on our traditions in a beautiful way that acknowledges the past but moves to the future.
That's a wonderful summary of Jewish Renewal and a fitting way to conclude our program and to invite you all to learn more about it this weekend in dialogue with the Zaslows.
That'll be April 5th through the 7th, and we will enjoy listening to them. Friday night, we'll co-lead. Saturday morning for Torah study. Saturday night is a concert, and I hope you'll invite people because it'll be an interfaith kind of weaving of traditions. And then Sunday afternoon on the 7th will be workshops, one by Reb Zaslow and one by his wife Devorah with her wonderful storytelling. So a whole weekend coming up soon, April 5th through 7th, 2024.
Thanks for coming. Have a good week, and hope to see you at the Shabbaton.
Shalom.
Shalom.